Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Where's the Line Season 2, where we continue to explore the gray areas of life. I'm here with my amazing co-host, Jane Liu. Jane, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Went to the office. I was very productive. But yeah, it's been a good day. How about you?
Great. Yeah, it's been awesome. I had a little midday sweat session at Rumble, and
Oh, nice.
for some of you that are listening constantly, they know that I'm a big Rumble boxing fan. So just did that. So I'm feeling refreshed and so excited for today's conversation. This is
Yeah.
something that is lately, as far as we know, in everyone's mouth. But we got a special guest today, and we're going to be talking about where's the line when it comes to ethics in AI. So I feel like no matter how old you are, you have been exposed to AI in some shape or form, and especially in the most recent year or so, we've been hearing it everywhere, ChatGPT, you name it. So yeah, excited to have our guest on. Our guest.
Yeah. I'm super, super pumped. So thank you to our special guest. His name is Maung. He's a good friend of mine, and he is the expert here in this room today about AI. So we're very looking forward to learn more from him. Maung, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Jane, and thank you, Sabrina. Yeah, like Jane said, my name is Mung. I am a software engineer. I guess I've been in the industry for almost a decade now, maybe a decade, depending on how you count. I work mostly on infrastructure type projects, but there's been a few times in my career where I've helped a team working on a specific implementation that involves different parts of AI. So things like machine learning, speech recognition, bring those to the general public. I work at Google currently, and I should say, the opinions that I share are my own and not my company's.
Yeah.
But previously, I used to work in healthcare, and before that, I worked for um, a little bit in defense contracting. So, that's my background. I'm really excited to talk about artificial intelligence and why we should maybe be a little scared, why we probably shouldn't be scared, all these different viewpoints. So, yeah, thank you for having me, Jane and Sabrina.
Awesome. Yeah, we're super honored to have you on. I feel like given your background and your current position, you're so well positioned to speak to this topic. So yeah, let's get right into it, Mung. So obviously AI is something that every company, especially in tech, has been talking about, and especially with the recent development, generative AI is something that's been discussed a lot, where essentially, as far as I understand, but would love to hear more from you and the development where AI models are actually trained to generate original human-like content based on
Mhm.
massive training data sets. And so many of our listeners probably heard of ChatGPT right now. And so some of the scientists have warned us for certain types of AI. And Jane and I mean, admittedly, we don't know enough about it. So we're really looking forward to hearing more from you. And then just to add some additional statistics that I found today, but like ChatGPT currently has over 100 million users, so it's just rapidly growing. And in just 5 days, ChatGPT surpassed 1 million users. So that to put that into perspective, it took other companies like Instagram many more days to reach that. So it's been just fascinating to see the adoption.
Mhm.
So yeah, we'll look. So let's hear from you more in terms of when we think of AI, of so people that are less familiar with it, right? So we may think of the Terminator movies or whether it's iRobot, The Matrix, Westworld, you name it. But how does really AI manifest in our day to day?
Yeah, I love that this is the first question actually. Just because I think the way I would answer it is that it depends where you draw the line
Mm.
for what you would consider AI or not, or what most folks would consider AI or not. I think if you're a little more relaxed with your definition, there are probably hundreds in everyday life, hundreds of examples for everyone out there. So things like um, if you have a lawn, right, you might have a sprinkler system that
Mm.
uh, integrates with the weather and then tries to predict how much water your lawn needs. If you drive a car, you have a bunch of different AI systems, not even, you don't even have to have a vehicle that's advertised as having AI in it to have it, right? A lot of the safety systems, when you back up, the backup camera can detect human beings, or at least try to detect human beings, I should say. So if you're more permissive, I think there's hundreds and hundreds of examples. In more of like, I guess the business world, when I'm interacting with my coworkers, they're a little more, I would say they're a little more strict about what they consider AI or not. And that falls into, I think, just complexity, right? We think of systems that are simple as, well, is it AI or not? I'm not sure. But when we start talking about systems that we individually can't understand, then I think more people see that as AI. So I'm thinking systems like fraud detection, right? If you made a purchase today with your credit card, there is a complex system that looks very much like a highly intelligent entity that's determining, is this purchase correct or not, or is it fraudulent or not? Does it look suspicious? All in the matter of seconds, right? The way we're talking right now, if a connection, if a server farm or if something goes down somewhere between where we're physically located, there's an AI system that determines like, oh, something's going wrong. Let's reroute Jane to this other location instead so that she can still listen to this conversation. So that's, I think, generally the level that I work with on day to day. And this last one, I think there's also a defensible position where you could say that there's no examples of AI. I think it's a little more philosophical, I think, but perfectly defensible, like I said, where some people might say we don't actually have any examples of real artificial intelligence out there. So yeah, I think very much depends on where you draw the line of what you consider to be AI or not.
Yeah. It's super fascinating because I think like we use the examples of the Matrix and Westworld and these like crazy stories, right, that we watch and hear. But, you know, when you really think about it, to your point, we interact with AI to some degree all the time, like in a day-to-day lives. And I don't think people, I mean, I think we all know, kind of know, but it's very hard to pinpoint exactly when or which systems or which tools or companies are leveraging AI to like engage with us. But it happens more than we think in our common day-to-day.
Yeah, and I'm curious, Sabrina and Jane, what are some of the things that you consider to be AI or not? For example, some people say that the sprinkler system example that I just said a few minutes ago, that might be considered automation rather than AI. Do you see that as AI, or do you think that's more automation, like I said? And remember, I don't think there's a right answer, right? It's all kind of just where you choose to say, this is the line where I accept this as AI, and this is on the other side, it's not AI.
Oh, I mean, we are no expert here. I will attempt first.
Yeah.
But I feel like if I am the person scheduling certain things, so like I schedule my sprinkler system or say my temperature, right, in my home, if I programmed it myself, then I don't think it's AI, because that's like automation, or I planned for this to happen at a different time. Whereas for me, AI is more using data to then predict something else, something that like didn't necessarily happen. And so it's like more predictive. It's more using historical data to then take an action. I mean, we do that as human beings. We look at historical data a lot of times to then build a system or program, whatever. But that's kind of what I think of. But I sometimes also wonder, like, there's those stories of your phone is listening to you and then they give you ads of whatever, like it's crazy. But like in my mind, that's probably another form of AI. Like it's probably audio but I think at least from a day-to-day perspective, if I plan for this to happen, then it's more automation. When it's predictive based on historical data without my decision, then I think of that as AI.
Gotcha. What do
Sabrina.
you think, Sabrina?
Yeah, no, Jane, I think that was a pretty good attempt from my perspective as a amateur here also. But yeah, I think every time we're dealing with a model that is programmed by learning from a million different interactions and getting smarter through these interactions to then predict certain outcomes. I think of it as AI, and I may be a little bit biased because I do work for an autonomous vehicle company, so there's a lot of
Awesome.
perception and prediction going into this. So yeah, so just exabytes of data being accumulated, collected to then train a certain model to then inform on certain action. That's when I think of AI. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I think both of those are great. Those are great answers. And really, you touched on a lot of, I would call characteristics of intelligence. I don't think we as humans kind of sit down and think about what intelligence actually means. We kind of just have this sense of, oh yeah, this is an intelligent being, or it's not an intelligent being. But if you break down intelligence, there's many different characteristics. There's some of the things that, the two of you mentioned, which is learning, right? Like learning the ability to be able to do something that you're not specifically taught to. That is an important aspect of intelligence. And so that's an important aspect of artificial intelligence. And there's a lot of things over the past couple of years, really, where we've been able to develop systems that exhibit some of the characteristics of intelligence. So machine learning, that's kind of a branch or something that is under the umbrella of AI, and that focuses purely on the learning aspect of intelligence. But there's also there's recognition as well. That's another branch of or another characteristics of AI, and actually another branch of characteristics of intelligence and another branch of AI. So yeah, intelligence is a lot of different aspects, and I should say there are actually some that I don't believe we have achieved in terms of mimicking artificially. Reasoning being one of the big ones, right? I don't think we have a machine that can reason quite yet. And that might be why some people say, true AI doesn't exist.
Do you also think that that is why some tech leaders are warning people about AI? Like, should we be concerned as individual if reasoning is not something that's been perfected yet? Yeah, how do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I think that is kind of pretty much you've hit the nail on the head. I think reasoning is a very important part of intelligence, and as human beings, part of how we interact with each other socially, right? It, again, not at the forefront of everyone's mind, but one example that comes back to my mind when we talk about AI, there's actually a really funny story, actually. There was a system created by DARPA, which is I forget what the acronym stands for, but it's a military, US military organization. So they are well funded, and there's some pretty intelligent people working on it. But the goal of the system was to train a model that could recognize humans kind of walking or approaching. You might want to, in a non-military sense, you might want to include this in a home security system, right? You want to be able to detect intruders and things like that. And so they spent a lot of time with this model, researching it, training it, and then they went out to test it. And within the first few minutes, the people that were trying to approach this camera basically were able to fool it with very, very simple approaches, simple and comical. So some of the examples they listed was you could approach it by doing somersaults towards it. So instead of walking or running or crawling, you just do an action that it doesn't expect, right? You could even go inside of a cardboard box, and anyone who plays video games might have seen this and might find it humorous, but you could, put yourself in a cardboard box and just walk up to it, because the AI isn't able to reason that, hey, this is probably a human being approaching me.
Mhm.
And so when you mention things like warnings about why we might want to be careful, is that a lot of the things that every human can do, almost every human, maybe very, very young babies don't have this reasoning skill yet, but things that almost every human can do, we haven't been able to get AI to do. And so you might be in situations where you, it doesn't have to be life or death, but it might be something like even fraud detection. Say you're trying to buy groceries. If you train an AI on it and you train it wrong, you might prevent someone from being able to buy groceries for the week. And that's that might not be worth the value of integrating AI into the system just because. So yeah, reasoning and that gap in intelligence is a very big part of why people are worried about AI, and a lot of leaders have warned us about the dangers of AI.
Yeah, that's super fascinating. And you just shared some very powerful examples, I think, that highlight the shortcomings of AI, right? So, which is actually a good segue into our next question, but it's all around sort of data ethics and AI ethics. And I feel like, yeah, like you mentioned some of the shortcomings, and even just reading about how AI and the algorithms could lead to discrimination or other sorts of bias, or simply, like in a DARPA case, not actually accounting for all of the various ways that a human could be showing up, which is actually something that in our autonomous vehicle industry we deal with every day, right? Because we want to make sure, obviously, we detect the people on the streets.
I bet, yeah.
Yeah, so in your perspective, what is data ethics and AI ethics, and what can a company do to protect our data?
Right. I think just independent of AI, I should mention, privacy and control are important. I won't dive too deeply into it since it's not specific to AI, but that's important in terms of ethics, right? Giving users control and the right to privacy. But really, I think there's two ways that I see where AI could go wrong. And you mentioned them. One is bias, right? AI has supported many AI systems, I should say, not all, but many AI systems, even the ones that that don't seem like it. They're supported by data. And when I say data, I mean big data. This is like you said, exabytes, which is a huge, huge amount of data. It's more than we probably, well, I shouldn't say this because these are famous last words. I was gonna say more than we probably will generate in our lifetime, but that's proven to be false over and over again, predictions like that. But yeah, exabytes is huge, but that is the level of data we're working with when we talk about AI. We're talking about hundreds of millions of users too, right? And so when we do that, whether it's AI or any other systems, you are treating people like a number. And that's kind of where bias comes in. When you stop considering the individual as like, hey, this is an actual human being that's complex, it's not just your credit score, it's not just how many dollars you have in the bank, it's not how often you open social media in a day. It's a whole bunch of other things. That's where bias comes in. All AI needs to be trained on data, and as fallible humans, we aren't going to be able to consider everything. So there's a lot of negative examples, I should say. They make me a little sad, but the silver lining is we're learning from them. That's why we have these examples. But things like the camera in your phone, it uses AI to determine things like the best lighting. Sometimes filters, right, try to use AI to morph your face to make it look better by some definition of better. And I think the way that it does that is by using what it has been trained on. And so if you have a skin tone that the engineers and the data scientists didn't have access to or didn't think about when they're developing this camera app, it might do some things to images that you take that are well, that are unfair, I would say. So
Mm,
the bias comes into it because we just have so much data, but at the same time, not enough data, right? Like we have so much data, but it's not like we have all the data that encompasses the entire human experience.
mm. It sounds like it's more around like diverse. It's not just quantity, right? It's also like quality and the and diversifying the data to make sure it represents like everybody that interacts with this AI. And
Mm-hmm.
like I have a very, as you're talking through this like bias and the training that happens ahead of time before it even interacts with any of us individuals, I'm even thinking, and this is so silly, but on TikTok, you know how there are those filters that like make you look whatever way, to your point, like make you look beautiful or give you these whatever, like give you a certain look. I have certainly used those filters before to see what it looks like,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not made for Asian faces. It
Mm-hmm.
looks great on, you know, like more Western features, but it is not great for people that look like me. And so like it just things like that I'm like, I wonder how this was created. I wonder like what type of representation was in the original like training and the creation of this filter. And I can imagine that that happens. And like obviously this is one little example that doesn't really impact anybody, but this can manifest in huge ways that impact a certain group or certain type of user.
Yeah, absolutely. I think probably social media is one of the most complex systems. Again, whether you consider AI or not is kind of where you draw the line personally, but it is one of the most complex systems that people actively engage in, right? Like we have a
Mm,
lot of passive systems that help us through the day, but social media is something we actively engage in. And I think a lot of the criticisms that people have about social media, especially when it comes to bias, things like echo chambers, those are a manifestation of um, bias and also a manifestation of like the second thing, which what I was going to talk about, which is just getting it wrong, right? Bias is sort of like nuanced. Um, this doesn't feel like this is for me. Whereas getting it wrong is just very clearly getting it wrong.
mhm,
I sometimes get ads on social media about dresses, and I am, a heterosexual man that isn't really interested in dresses. But the thing is, I live with my wife, and there's some complex algorithm that believes that I might be interested in dresses.
mm,
And I think you say it's not an important example, and maybe that it's not, but I think it kind of is a great way for people to understand how these systems can go wrong, right? Because we've
mhm.
all had examples where social media has surprised us in negative ways, sometimes in positive ways, right? There are positives of these algorithms, but we've seen social media get it wrong. And I think it's a great kind of everyday example of like, oh shoot, like if social media gets it wrong, I certainly don't want my bank to get it wrong. I don't want healthcare to get it wrong. I
Mhm.
don't want autonomous vehicles to get it wrong. So I think it's a great like starting point to kind of think about other systems of where it might be more impactful if AI gets more prevalent and isn't implemented thoughtfully.
Yeah. I know we talked a lot about like the potential cons or the limitations of AI. And it's very like that's a very real part of what we're going through right now as a society. But on the other hand, there's also a lot of pros. Clearly, you gave a couple examples of how AI has simplified our life, or even just like allowed people to do certain things that maybe previously they weren't able to. Can you give us a couple more examples where like whether that's within our daily lives or even some of these emerging things like chat gpt, like how are these things maybe improving our lifestyle?
Yeah, no, that's great. That's with every little cycle, I would say our lives do get better.
Mhm.
So the examples I mentioned of like fraud detection, uh, I hope I haven't been unfair to them, but from what I understand, those algorithms, those systems are very, very good.
Mhm.
You might actually um, there might be some false positives, but the way they've set it up, you kind of just call in and say, hey, what's going on? And then you can usually resolve it right away. But they're good at detecting fraud, credit card companies. The safety systems, autonomous vehicles, really smart folks are still working on it, but we've been able to use that work and implement it in things that we are confident about, like the backup human detection system I mentioned. It's okay if it gets it wrong. If my backup camera warns me that, hey, there's a human there and it just happens to be a cardboard box, I'm going to be okay with it. I really want to know if there's a human that I don't see. And you mentioned ChatGPT. I think there's a lot of apprehension behind systems like that, right? Will it replace us? What is it going to mean? Will I be able to get customer service, talk to a human being after ChatGPT gets implemented? And those are all real fears. But the truth is, systems like ChatGPT, they can really make our lives smoother. I should ask you, both of you work in environments where you have to interact with a lot of other people. And I want to ask you, like, what would you say is the most frustrating part of your job that you have to do every single day? And, do you think that can actually be automated? Would you be happier if ChatGPT or systems like ChatGPT helped you with those things?
Thank you for the question. It's as I think about it in terms of data aggregation, there's some reporting that is very much still somewhat manual that we do here at my company. So if I just think about it in that perspective, how can I create the right prompts, right, to help me automate a certain regular cadence reporting that I always have to do, that I don't have to think about, right? It's just like automatically this day of the month, this is going to help me. And then the other thing that's really cool, and I've been a little reluctant to use some of these tools, but if I could just have it help me creating strategy documents from just the data, right? And of course, you always want to have that human element of like, does this make sense, the recommendation, but just turning something that's raw data form into like contextualizing with insights and then helping me at least create that foundation of the PowerPoint, whatever you want to do. And then so that I only have to look at it and really make sure it makes sense. But just doing some of the legwork in terms of the writing and the data aggregation, I think will be helpful.
Yeah.
Jane, what about you?
I think for me, there are definitely a lot of administrative tasks that are a part of my job that I do not enjoy, that I definitely think at some point it needs to go away and some, system would replace. Even my broader team. So I work in customer success, and I know we talk a lot about how the call recordings that we have with our customer, like that could be run through AI and identify what the themes were, how long certain people talked, and what the objective was, right? Like a lot of that can be identified through, and then it can be logged and, documented later on in other systems. So I think a lot of times the end-to-end, the process can probably be done through AI. I think and I know this is kind of getting into the question of like, would this replace my job? I think where AI is not able to replace my job, like a big part of my job is relationship, is like people. And as much as I can build a great project plan via ChatGPT templates or other templates, it doesn't replace the relationship I have with another team member that I'm partnering with. And a lot of like how smooth project goes is how you communicate, how you partner, and like the relationship component, the soft skills that you have. And we don't have that right through the current platforms. But at least that's been my experience. Certainly a lot of things can either already start to be generated by AI as templates for you to use to simplify our lives, or at some point it will be automated. But I think there's still many components of our jobs that are not fully there yet.
Yeah, I think personally, one of my favorite features that I've encountered, or I guess I don't know if I've encountered it really, but one of the things that people talk about is summarizing emails. I know I get a
Yeah.
lot of emails, and it's sometimes nice for something to just give me a 2 or 3 sentence summary of emails, right? That saves a lot of time. So yeah, I think there is a lot of things that the three of us could probably personally think about, even in the sphere of just work, that where AI would improve. But outside of work, there's really amazing things that are happening with if not like all of AI, different characteristics, like I was saying before. You hear a lot of excitement happening in the medical space. So there's AI systems that can do some diagnoses more accurately than human doctors.
Mm,
Uh, and even if it wasn't more accurate, if it was good enough, right? Of course you want the best, but the thing is, there's only so many doctors, and we, I think, are lucky to have access to good healthcare, but not everyone in the world does.
mhm,
So the thought of shipping, 80 doctors to somewhere in the world where access to healthcare is poor might not be tenable. But the
mhm,
thought of shipping a laptop and a camera, that would be totally doable, and that would help so many people get diagnoses that they otherwise might not be able to. So
mhm.
medicine is great. I know there's a lot of work in drug design. So if you don't know anything about drug design, it's really expensive. And I know there's this whole industry around it. You could say it's good or bad, but the current state is that designing drugs, medicine, I should say, is very expensive. And AI can help companies predict whether a certain molecule is going to be more likely to be beneficial than other molecules. And this will help us with bringing more potentially life-saving or life-improving drugs to market faster. And that's, a direct impact on human beings. I think there's a lot
Mhm.
of other things in like climate science as well, right? Modeling what's going to happen in the future. There's just a lot of things on the horizon that AI and different aspects of AI are helping us with that we should be excited for, completely excited for. And yeah, I don't want to downplay that at all. It's not all negative. In fact, I personally think there's a lot more positive than a lot more negatives, right? Like it sucks when people get it wrong, but that's how humans are. We're always gonna get something wrong, and it's gonna suck. It's gonna be terrible. But
Mhm.
if the last few decades have been a trend that's going to continue, then AI is going to help us as a society just be better. And I don't know, I'm really excited for that.
Oh, you have me excited now. I know we went through a whole evolution here, but that's what's so exciting about this space. But yeah, I appreciate you sharing. I love that you talked about medical space, because I 100% agree. And again, not knowing a lot, but just like the possibilities there and knowledge sharing across like millions of people that may have the same diagnoses. But if you just work in your little hospital silo, there may not be that potential, right? So like what is the opportunity to really share across the world and be able to detect certain cancers faster or whatever? It's like so cool. So I'm excited for that too. All right, well, we're already very much pivoted into this, but I think just expanding on this, Maung, for our listeners, I feel like there's still a lot of fear right now in terms of job replacement. But as we think about sort of certain occupations might be more prone to, I don't want to say replacement, I'd rather err on the side of how can jobs be augmented rather than just replaced, right? But I mean, studies show that the following jobs might be most impacted by generative AI, which is writers or analysts or traders, teachers. So if for those that maybe in those occupations or even if they're not, but people might just be fearful of if the AI is going to take their job, what advice can we give those individuals that are maybe in those occupations that are at higher risk for replacement?
Yeah, no, that's I'm glad you asked that question. I don't think we need to mince words, right? It is a very scary prospect. I'm a programmer, and I've seen systems that can write entire programs correctly,
Mm,
help me write code. It surprises me sometimes. I will start writing something, and the next 10 lines of code, it just says press tab to autocomplete. Like, holy cow, like, how did you know what I'm going to do? And it's scary. Like, it's scary for even someone like me. What's going to happen in the future? What's going to happen to my job in the future? So yeah, it's a very real fear. And I don't think I would go so far to say, don't worry about it. I think we should be thinking about it. This is kind of, if I had to go the tough love approach, which I don't think I'm going to land on, but if I had to go that approach, I think what I would say is that AI is going to replace a lot of roles that are going to be not as challenging, maybe. But the way we should see it with a little bit of fear is that those roles are kind of holding us back anyway, right? Like we mentioned that things like administrative tasks and stuff like that, those are a big part of our jobs, but in my opinion, they're holding us back from doing cooler stuff, at least overall society as a whole. So that's, I think, my tough love answer. But I think my more like, for the average listener out there, I would say that we have a lot of time. You know, I've used ChatGPT. I'm actually curious, have either of you used ChatGPT or Midjourney or Dolly or any of the systems? What did you think of it? Just real quick. I'm curious.
Very timely, because yes, both personal as well as professional. Luckily at our company though, we have a new tool that works with ChatGPT, but it's approved by the company now, so we can use it from a professional use cases, which, yeah, as I touched on, like aggregation or even summarizing. So one of you said that, or like summarizing certain documents, just give me the top 10. So I love that. On the personal side, I was a little scared of ChatGPT, and then I think we just need to embrace it, right? We need to understand how can it help us so that we can learn and be better at what we do or evolve our own roles. And the people that will be successful are the ones that have been and will embrace this, right? So that can understand how to become more efficient. But yeah, most recently I used it to create a travel itinerary for Chile, because I don't know Chile well and we only have a week. So I just gave it like my parameters. I want to see a little bit of Antarctica. I want to see a little bit of the desert, like, and Chile is a very long country, as we know, and just helped me get the right plan. It was amazing. And for the podcast, I was just testing out a few things, like how to create a social media strategy. But yeah, it is fascinating what it can do.
Yeah, same. I've used ChatGPT. A lot of it is like to generate templates, to generate sample emails, and I put in the theme that I want for this particular email and who I'm writing it to. And a lot of times the language is tailored for that audience, which is like so smart. That's what you want to do. And if anything, that does better than maybe some people who are not great at writing scripts for a certain audience. So I've really enjoyed it. I think the limitation for me is like the content that I'm creating there is not owned by me. It's owned by, is it like Microsoft or no, it's I don't know, whatever company that owns ChatGPT, but it's no longer owned by like me and my company anymore. And so we've been really hesitant to use it for work or for like confidential information.
Yeah, I've used all these tools too, and I've been genuinely impressed by them. But you said a word there, limitation, which I think is kind of what I was going towards. You mentioned like the ownership problem, but these systems out there, ChatGPT, I think, is on version 4 now. I'm sure they're working on 5, but it's still pretty limited. You know, I think about this program called Eliza, all caps, back in the 1960s, I think, where it was basically a chatbot similar to ChatGPT, and it was impressive for the first 2 minutes that you interact with. So, you know, after about 2 minutes, you start seeing some of its limitation. The thing about ChatGPT is that if you interact with it long enough, you'll start seeing some of its limitations too, right? You'll maybe it takes an hour, maybe it takes 3 hours, depending on what you ask it to do. But yeah, it's pretty limited still. It's amazing, I want to say, but it's limited. It's not going to replace us overnight. So I think the reassuring advice that I can offer everyone is that we've got time, and it's going to happen. The way that replacement is going to happen is that the annoying bits are going to get replaced first, right? Like
Mm.
things like email. I hope one day that we can have a robot with AI that can clean my house. But the annoying bits are going to happen first, and we should try and look at it as an opportunity that's going to free up our time, our mind space, our wallets, all these different things to allow us to do cooler, better things. We,
Mhm.
both as a society and as individuals, I think, and I'm sorry this is a little soapboxy, but I don't think we can get stuck in one place, right? Progress will move on with or without us.
Mhm.
And so the great reassuring thing about AI is that it's going to take time. We've
Mhm.
got time to prepare for it. And we probably should start preparing for it now if we haven't already. But yeah, that's the reassuring thing I can offer. And I say this as someone that, has someone that just loves poking holes in systems. It's very much like Swiss cheese. So yeah, I don't want to seem too insensitive, right? Things are going to be replaced for sure. That's just going to be the reality.
Mhm.
But
But
that's like the natural evolution, right?
Right.
yes.
Creative
Mhm.
destruction.
Yeah.
Yes,
Our
exactly.
industrial revolution would have not happened if there are certain jobs that have.
Mhm.
Yes. And I think when creative destruction happens, my personal thing is we should be a little mournful, like sometimes I miss the concept of a milkman. I didn't grow up with milkman, but like, that kind of vibe is really cool. But at the same time, we shouldn't let kind of like our mourning or our fear or apprehension prevent us from, moving forward and using tools like AI to improve our lives.
One question I had for you, and I was kind of thinking about this as the question that you asked me, and I was thinking about the limitations. I think for AI, where it currently cannot replace like my job is, sure, it can do the administrative things. And to your point, it gets rid of the annoying part of my job. And then it allows me to be creative in my job and actually do what I'm good at doing, right? And to like elevate my work, which is great. But then as we think about jobs like more creative jobs, right? Because we work in tech, like we don't work in super creative roles. But what about things like writers, artists, right? Like Maung, you are an amateur artist, you enjoy like creating art. How does that impact them? Because there are tools out there, like you mentioned Midjourney, there's tools out there that are creating super like incredible artwork of whatever style, right? Because they're learning from whatever style you want them to learn, and they're creating incredible work, and they have this like artificial creativity in a way, right? Like that applies to writers and artists, whatever. And even music, like this has happened in music as well. What's your perspective of this, especially coming from somebody who like enjoys creating art?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I really, oh man, I've got a lot to say. I think that um so I've used Midjourney and it is very impressive. Same with Stable Diffusion and Dolly and all that. And I hear they can do hands now, right? That's the joke with a lot of this AI art,
Right.
that they get the hands wrong. But I think the most recent iterations can even do those. So there is a lot of, I will say, ethical quandaries with this, right? Because a lot of these things are trained on artists' creations without explicit consent. And there's a lot of questions about that. But when it comes to replacement, I've actually seen a lot of artists that use this as a base for creating things, right? So when it comes to writing, um, a lot of people will create a draft and then they'll iterate on that a lot. And usually, because of the limitations, the end result is very different from the draft that AI came up with. Of course, there are examples of people who have quite literally just taken the output of AI, both images and text, and published a book with it with very little editing. And you kind of look at that and it makes you feel uncomfortable as a creative person, right? It doesn't feel pure anymore. And my personal opinion is when it comes to AI, we're going to use it as tools. Everyone's going to use it as tools. We might write a short story for kids like a bedtime story, or incorporate it into their incorporate little bits of their life, right? Like Jane likes dinosaurs, or Sabrina likes cars, and there might not be a story like that for little kids, but a parent can go and create that for them. So I think we're going to use it as tools, but for the implications of the creatives overall, I think we're going to see some creative destruction, but I think the surviving communities, I will say, will actually be stronger for it, right? Like we will go through a tough time, but in the end, I think there will still be folks who don't mess with AI art and AI writing and all that. And we're going to see a lot more creative output from them. And we're going to see a lot more people who appreciate the craft, the purity of the craft. At least if this follows some trends I've seen before, I think that's what's going to happen. So yeah, I hope that's a very fair response, right? We should be concerned about creative destruction. We shouldn't be apprehensive, but I think after the bad times are over, we're going to be stronger for it in many different ways.
Yeah, this is the art one. To me, I struggle with it because I look at, like, Jane has sent me your Instagram and you have such a talent. And I feel like with artists or with like writers, how do you make sure that it's a fair like assessment or like pricing or rewarding artists for their work? Like, where do you draw the line there in terms of, well, I used 40% of my work was inspired by AI versus you made something from scratch. I feel like you should get rewarded more for it. So I don't really know yet how that works, but
Yeah.
I just feel like it's not fair.
Yeah.
And yeah. Oh, go ahead, Jane.
I was also thinking too, you mentioned, Maung, like they take inspiration and then they like develop the picture more, and then it sometimes often become a completely different picture or something. But I'm like wondering, as artists, you also take inspiration from things, right, that are not your work, or from landscape that is not your own, right? Like, when does it become, because at that point then artists are also taking ideas from other artists or other creations, and you don't
That's
blame
right.
that, right? So I think that's where it gets really tough, because it's, from a philosophical perspective, it's the same concept. It's just now done by a machine rather than a person.
Yeah, regarding the art question, and I think this is applicable to writing and other mediums too, but my personal view on art and when I appreciate a piece of art is when I can see intention behind it. So I think that is really, for me, how I interact with other pieces of art. And when we're talking about AI, when we're talking about intelligence, intention is actually, I think, a characteristic of intelligence, right? Like, a machine can mimic a human, but you can kind of tell that there's no intention behind it because someone programmed it that way. And I think, for me at least, intention is a huge, huge part of both intelligence and also art. So, Sabrina, when you ask about fairness, right, I think if you look at two paintings and one was created by AI with very little prompt, and the other was created with even 90% AI, but someone went ahead and tweaked, maybe they changed aquamarine to like teal, right? A very small change, but there was some intention behind it. Like, I wanted to change this color because I thought that it helped with the composition better. Or maybe someone used Photoshop to take a photograph that they took and maybe adjust someone's gaze a little bit because the person wasn't looking straight at the camera, but the photograph works so much better with a straight gaze right at the person looking at it, right? Those little adjustments reflect intention to me. And I think that is going to be missing in a lot of AI art. Like, you can see a pretty picture for sure. AI can create a pretty picture. I think that what's scary to folks is that the link between pretty picture and intention is getting narrower and narrower, because you can state your intention to a system like Midjourney and all that, and then it sort of knows your intention and creates a image with sort of your intention in it. But like I said, the gap is still pretty wide. I think that if you go to an artist and say, hey, I'd like a painting of my cat, and I want it to be playing with a ball of yarn, right? The person that uses pure AI will probably be able to get maybe even 90% of your intention into that painting and their intention into that painting. But the person that's going to do it traditionally, purely, that's pure intention, right? There's nothing that they're copying from. There's nothing artificial about it. And I think that's going to be the gap that is going to differentiate things. I think it's getting narrower with time, but I think that gap still exists. And that's really what we should be aiming for as artists and creatives, making sure that our vision, our intention is still captured in the resulting work. That is something that I don't think AI can mimic quite yet. A little philosophical, but that is my answer.
I love it. This intention will stick with me. That's so true. Yeah, I didn't think of it that way.
One thing I'll even add to, as I was thinking about even just this episode ahead of time, I was thinking, well, when I look at art, I want this art to show me or make me feel a certain emotion, right? A lot of times when you look at art, that's like it evokes a particular emotion. And then I was doing research, and there are a lot of videos on YouTube where people are blindly looking at different creations. One could be a person's drawing of the same prompt, and then one's an AI drawing. And like half of the time, the AI one conveys the message or the feeling possibly even better than the person who drew. And it just made me start to question like why or how I appreciate art, right? Like different people appreciate art for different things. Like Maung, you had your own definition of how you enjoy art, and I have my own. And sometimes it gets really tough because yeah, as I was watching those videos and doing research for this, I was like, well, I actually preferred this AI one, possibly more even than the person's. I mean, there's no
Yeah.
objective answer, right? It's what you prefer, what you enjoy looking at. And there's no yeah, it just was fascinating.
Yeah, I think my personal opinion is if this wasn't generally available to everyone, and someone, a researcher, an artist, say it's two people, a researcher and an artist, they got together and they said, I want to use a computer to create a painting of a beautiful person. And they created some stuff like Midjourney can do right now. And they showed it to the world. I think some people would call that pretty beautiful, right? There's some beauty in that, and artificial machine being able to kind of generate something. I say pretty picture kind of in a negative sense, but I'm saying it now in a positive sense. There's something beautiful in the intention of creating a pretty picture with a machine. Like that itself is an artistic pursuit. I think that it's perfectly fine to appreciate AI art. I think it's totally like it's what you prefer, right? But I think most people get not stuck, but most people wrestle with the idea of fairness. Like, how is it fair that a machine can do this and can do it without sleep, hundreds and hundreds of paintings every minute. And I think that we are probably going to have to grapple with that. I don't think there's an answer right now. There's, laws and ethics and morals, and there's probably also like I fear the day that we can create photorealistic paintings of everything. So there's apprehension as well. But I don't think we should be scared to ask these questions. I don't think we should be scared to like AI art. I think that's not the right way to go. We should continue going. We should continue being afraid. We should continue asking questions. That's what I would say.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much. This has been an incredible conversation. Like this is so enlightening, and I personally have learned a lot. I know, Sabrina, this is something you and I have been talking about for a while, so we're just very grateful to have you on and being our expert for the day. Before we go, let our audience know of any projects or anything you would like to plug.
Yeah, no, thank you for the opportunity for both the podcast and for catching up with the two of you. I think the most important thing to me, I recently got involved with organization called Girls Who Code. And I think apropos to us talking about bias and representation and all that, we just more generally need more people working on problems like AI and bias. And so I just want to recommend folks to get involved. I think there's many ways to get involved. I know that Girls Who Code is a great organization. I love working with them. There's a whole bunch of other organizations too, but I encourage folks to get involved with that. It doesn't have to be with money, it can be with time as well. So yeah, that's what I'd like to plug. That's what I like to encourage others to do.
Amazing. Well, thank you so, so much. And we want to hear from our audience as well. If any of you have experience with AI, if you want to talk more about AI or even have questions about AI, let us know by emailing us at whereisthelinepod@gmail.com, and make sure to subscribe wherever you're listening. We are on Apple, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.